Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. What I'm about to tell you didn't happen years ago. It wasn't a slow burn or a tragic fade. It happened this week. And I still feel like I'm sleepwalking through what used to be my life. The garbage truck was outside. That's how quiet it was inside the house. I remember hearing the mechanical hiss as the claw grabbed our can. The only other sound? Her voice, low, conspiratorial, on a call she thought I couldn't hear. I was crouched in the hallway, holding the stupid printer cord she asked me to find an hour earlier. That's when I heard her say it. No, I'd never choose him again. Look at my life. I settled. I gave up passion for peace. And now I'm bored. She said it casually, like she was discussing a bad meal. He's so careful all the time. So soft. I used to think it was sweet. Now it makes me want to scream. I stay because it's easier. That's it. I didn't drop the cord. I didn't make a sound. I didn't even breathe. I just knelt there, in that dumb old t-shirt she once said made me look cozy, and let her words cut through every part of me that still believed I mattered. There were other words. Laughter. A man's voice I didn't recognize. I didn't stick around to hear more. I stood up, walked into the living room, put the cord on the table. She didn't look up. I went to the bedroom, took nothing but my phone and my wallet. I opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it softly behind me. I didn't leave in rage. I left because staying meant erasing myself. And I'd already spent too many years watching her fall out of love in slow motion. Now I'm in a motel that smells like bleach and burned coffee. Typing this into my notes app at 3:14 a.m. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do next. All I know is she said she'd never choose me again. So I finally chose myself and walked away. The moment I shut that motel door behind me, I expected something. A wave of freedom, relief, a sense of power for finally leaving. But all I felt was the sour bite of artificial lemon cleaner and a bed that made a crunching sound when I sat on it. There was no grand victory, just the realization that I had no plan, no suitcase, and no idea how to start a life that didn't revolve around her. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like an hour, just staring at the wall. Her voice kept echoing in my head. I'd never choose him again. It looped like a broken record. Every time I blinked, I saw her laughing. Not at a joke I made, those days were long gone, but at someone else's words. Someone who made her feel alive, apparently. Someone who wasn't me. I thought about calling my brother, but we haven't been close since the wedding. He said she seemed cold. I defended her like an idiot. I didn't want the told you so. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want anyone to know that I had become the guy who brought his wife flowers while she was texting another man under the dinner table. At 10:47 p.m. she texted. Just one word. Hey. Not where are you? Not are you okay? Just, hey. Like I had gone for a walk and she suddenly remembered I existed. I didn't respond. Instead, I looked through my photo gallery. A decade of memories, all poisoned now. There she was in our kitchen, laughing at something I said, wearing my oversized hoodie. There we were at the lake, her arms around my neck, whispering something I never quite heard but believed meant love. And yet, here I was, alone, sitting on a motel bed that smelled like expired bleach and old heartbreak, because she didn't have the courage to just leave me. She stayed because it was convenient. But here's the thing no one tells you. Being the safe choice is only romantic in movies. In real life, it means you're the person she calls when the car breaks down, not when her heart races. That night, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing I still hoped. She made her choice. Now I was going to learn how to live with mine. By the time morning rolled in, that single text, hey, was still sitting unread at the top of my screen. I kept expecting a second one to follow, maybe something like, where are you? Or, can we talk? But it never came. That silence said everything. She hadn't noticed I was gone. Not really. I think that message was more of a reflex than actual concern, like muscle memory. A habit, not a feeling. I left the motel before 7 a.m. The coffee in the lobby tasted like cardboard and burned metal, but I drank it anyway. The guy at the desk barely looked up as I dropped off the key. Maybe that's what I was now. Easy to ignore. Forgettable. Just another quiet man slipping out before anyone noticed he was hurting. I went back to my car and sat for a long time, staring at my own hands on the steering wheel like they belonged to someone else. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to go home. So I just drove. Nowhere. Through old neighborhoods I hadn't seen in years. Past that ice cream shop where we used to argue about toppings. Past the high school track where she once dared me to race her barefoot. It all felt like a ghost town of better versions of us. At 9:02 a.m., my phone vibrated again. This time it was a notification from our shared cloud storage. A photo had been uploaded. I knew better. I should have ignored it. But curiosity, or maybe self-hate, got the better of me. It was a selfie, taken at her office. Her hair was curled, lips glossed, eyes sparkling. But it wasn't the photo that gutted me. It was the reflection in the window behind her. A man, standing close, way too close. His hand resting lightly on the small of her back. She either didn't notice or didn't care. That was the moment the denial finally died. It wasn't just emotional distance or coldness. She had someone else. I wasn't her backup. I was her placeholder. I didn't cry. Not then. I just put my phone face down on the passenger seat and kept driving with no direction. No plan, no destination. But deep down, something else had started to wake up in me. Something unfamiliar. Not anger exactly, but the start of something that had been asleep for years. Self-respect. And that, I think, scared me more than anything. I don't know what possessed me to go back to the house. Maybe it was stupidity. Maybe it was closure. Or maybe it was just habit. When you've lived so long inside someone's orbit, it's hard to remember how to spin on your own. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. I didn't want her to hear the engine. I didn't want to be seen. I just needed to grab a few things, essentials, and leave before she came back from wherever she'd gone with him. The door was still unlocked, like always. We never used to worry about safety. I slipped inside and stood there in the hallway, surrounded by familiar things that suddenly felt alien. Her coat still hung on the hook. The smell of her perfume lingered in the air. But everything felt like a museum, frozen, curated, fake. I went to the bedroom first. My closet section was almost empty already. I hadn't realized how little of myself I had in that space. Just a few shirts, a broken belt, a pair of shoes with soles that whined. The rest of it? Hers. Even the drawers I used to use had been taken over by her scarves, her curling iron, her chaos. But one drawer wasn't fully closed. It was small, the kind of drawer you don't think twice about. But something made me pull it open. Inside was a black leather pouch. Something told me it wasn't mine. I unzipped it. Inside were 2 things. A set of cufflinks I'd never seen before, and a handwritten note. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just a date. 2 weeks ago. The note read, "Last night was unreal. You make me feel like I can breathe again. Like I'm actually alive. I know it's wrong, but being with you feels more right than anything I've ever known. I don't want to go back to pretending. I want you. Always." I stood there for a full minute, blinking at the paper like maybe it would rearrange itself, reveal it was written to someone else from someone else. But I knew her handwriting. Every curve of every letter. I'd spent years writing her love notes in the same messy ink. She wasn't just gone emotionally. She was gone physically, fully, intimately, and she'd made no attempt to hide it. I didn't take the note. I didn't destroy it either. I zipped the pouch shut, placed it back exactly where I found it, and pushed the drawer closed. I wanted her to believe I still hadn't seen the truth. Let her keep lying. Let her dig deeper. Because for the first time in years, I felt something shift. I wasn't there to beg. I was there to disappear with a plan. When I closed that drawer, it was like closing the lid on my old life. I could almost hear the click of a lock in my head. I didn't take anything of hers, didn't leave a note, didn't even turn on a light. I just went from room to room gathering fragments of myself that had been scattered like loose change. A few books I'd kept by the nightstand. My old college hoodie. A shoebox of letters I'd written but never given her. That was it. 10 years boiled down to one duffel bag and a wallet that suddenly felt like a stranger's. Outside, the street was empty. The world was still going about its business. Mailboxes standing, sprinklers hissing, dogs barking behind fences. As if my marriage hadn't just dissolved like sugar in hot water. I walked past the rose bush she planted last spring and wondered who she would tell about us now. Would I become some tragic footnote in her next story? Oh, Curtis? He left. Couldn't handle it. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a shudder. I drove without thinking. No destination. Highway lights blurred into streaks. I played an old playlist we made together and hated myself for it. Every song was a memory I didn't want, a version of us that never really existed. By the time I realized where I was, I had pulled into a rest area 2 counties away. The place smelled like stale coffee and diesel. People walked in and out of the building with their lives intact, their faces unbroken. In the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. The eyes staring back at me were tired, watery, and a little wild. My phone buzzed in my pocket, 3 new messages. 1 from her, 2 from an unknown number. Her message simply read, "We need to talk." The unknown numbers were missed calls from our bank. My stomach dropped. We had a joint account. And suddenly, for the first time all night, panic pushed through the numbness. I opened the banking app with shaking hands. The balance stared back at me, $11.27. 10 years of saving gone overnight. Rent, bills, everything gone. My heart started pounding so hard I had to grip the sink to stay upright. She hadn't just taken my love. She'd taken my safety. And just like that, my escape turned into survival. I sat in my car at that rest area until the sky turned a pale gray, gripping the steering wheel like it could keep me from floating away. The banking app still glowed on my phone screen, $11.27. Everything else we'd saved, every paycheck I deposited, every extra tutoring session I took to make ends meet, it was gone. In the blur of panic and betrayal, I did something I had never done before. Called her. It rang 3 times and then a man's voice answered. Not her father's voice. Not a coworker's. A stranger's voice, low and amused, saying her name like he owned it. I hung up so fast I nearly dropped the phone. My fingers went cold. That was it. No more denial. No more maybe it's just emotional or maybe she'll explain. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating something bigger, and I was the punchline. I drove until I found a 24-hour diner with flickering neon letters spelling out ETS in dull red. Inside it smelled like burnt toast and stale syrup, but it was warm. I slid into a booth and stared at the cracked vinyl tabletop. My reflection in the window looked like a ghost. The waitress poured me coffee without asking. She must have seen that expression before. The look of someone whose life just folded in half overnight. I wanted to tell her everything, but all I could manage was, "Can you leave the pot?" As I sat there, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from an unknown number. "Stop calling. She's with me now. Move on." No name. No explanation. Just that. My stomach knotted so hard I thought I might be sick. I looked around the diner at the truckers and night shift workers and wondered how many of them had gone through something like this. How many of them had sat in a booth at 4 a.m. realizing their home wasn't their home anymore. For the first time in my life, anger and humiliation twisted together inside me until they were indistinguishable. I wasn't a violent man. I wasn't a bold man. I was the man who carried her bags, who sent good morning texts, who forgave small cruelties. But in that booth, staring at my coffee, I felt something new. Resolve. Not revenge. Not a plan. Just the sharp, unshakable knowledge that I could never walk back into that house, into that role, into her shadow. I pulled a napkin toward me and started writing. Not to her, but to myself. A list. 3 things. Find a place to stay. Separate accounts. Call an attorney. My handwriting was shaky but deliberate. For the first time since hearing her voice on that call, I felt the tiniest flicker of control return. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I stayed at that diner until the sun came up, long after the waitress changed shifts. When I finally left, my hands were shaking from caffeine and anxiety, but I had that napkin in my pocket. My 3-point plan. My fragile little lifeline. I wasn't thinking straight, but I knew I had to act fast, before she drained anything else, before I became even more of a ghost in my own life. I parked outside the nearest law office that didn't require an appointment. The waiting room smelled like old carpet and copier ink. A fake plant drooped in the corner like it was grieving with me. When the receptionist asked who I was here to see, I hesitated. I didn't know how to say it. I just mumbled, "Divorce," and she nodded like she'd heard it 1,000 times. The attorney's name was Mark Durkin, mid-50s, wore glasses he didn't need. He had the kind of expression that said, "You're not the first to get hit by a truck called betrayal." He didn't waste time with small talk. I told him I was married, that I had reason to believe she was cheating, that she'd emptied our account, that I had no idea what else she might be planning. When I gave him her name, he paused. "I've heard that name before," he said, scanning something on his screen. "She in marketing?" My blood ran cold. I nodded slowly. She was a listed party in another case last year. Not the defendant, but, let's just say, not the hero of the story either. I couldn't speak. My throat closed up. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I didn't want to know yet. But something told me this wasn't her first rodeo. Maybe I was just another pawn in her long game. Mark walked me through the basics. What to expect. What documents to gather. What not to do. The most important part? He told me to stop communicating with her directly. "She'll try to bait you," he warned. "Guilt, charm, tears, blame. You've got to stay clean. If she left a trail, we'll find it. But don't let her rewrite the narrative while you're still bleeding." It was the first time someone treated me like I wasn't crazy for feeling broken. I left the office with a folder full of papers, instructions, and a subtle flicker of hope. But just as I reached my car, my phone lit up again. This time it was a voicemail. From her. I stared at it for a long time before pressing play. Her voice, shaky and soft, filled the speaker. "Curtis, I need to talk to you. Please don't do anything yet. There's something you don't know. I need to explain." I should have deleted it. I should have thrown the phone into the street. But instead, I hit replay. Twice. I didn't call her back. I didn't reply. I just sat in my car with the engine off, letting her voicemail play in my head again and again until the words lost meaning. "There's something you don't know." That line clawed at me. Maybe she was pregnant. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she was lying. Again, I didn't trust my own judgment anymore, and that terrified me. But Mark was right. If she had something to say, she could say it in court. I wasn't going to be the man who crawled back because the voice of the woman who wrecked him sounded sad. So I blocked her number. I closed the joint account and opened my own. I stayed with an old coworker for a few nights while I looked for a small rental. Not ideal, creaky floors and a leaky shower, but it was mine. Every morning, I woke up and reminded myself that healing wasn't instant. It wasn't romantic. It was slow, messy, and full of doubt. But it was happening. A week later, I mailed her the wedding ring. Not in a dramatic box or with some angsty letter. Just the ring, taped inside a plain envelope, with a note that said one thing. "You were right. You'd never choose me again. But now I finally chose myself." That was it. I never heard back. And that silence, that used to haunt me. But now it's peaceful. She doesn't own my mornings anymore. Or my money. Or my mind. I started teaching music again. I got new students. I picked up an old guitar I hadn't touched in years. I started to feel like a person again. Not a placeholder, not a prop, not wallpaper. A few nights ago, I went to that same diner. The waitress recognized me, asked how I was doing. I smiled for the first time in weeks and said, "Better." And I meant it. Have you ever reached your breaking point and finally chosen yourself? Share the moment that changed everything for you in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Confessions for more powerful real-life stories that hit home.